Come on in, sit back, relax, and listen to episode 150 of the Wealth Tech Today podcast. I'm your host, Craig Iskowitz, founder of Ezra Group Consulting. And this podcast features news, interviews, and analysis on the trends and best practices all around wealth management technology. Our topic for this month is ESG data. We chose this because we felt it was an area that's very hot in the industry. It's trending now in the news, getting a lot of coverage, and we wanted to know more about how the sausage is made behind the scenes. How is the data gathered? How is it analyzed? How is it reviewed? We only hear more about the output. We don't only hear about the back end. So that's what we're interested in is the data and where it's coming from and how it's being formed. And I was excited to get today's guest, Elena Philipova from Refinitiv, mainly because Refinitiv has been a leader in ESG data and reporting. But before I get into that, let me first expound on how important data is to the success of any ESG initiative or basically any technology-driven program for that matter. This is why Ezra Group launched our data assessment service for enterprise wealth management firms. We conduct an in-depth review of your current data sources, downstream consumers, data utilization, and data infrastructure for a target area of your firm. Then we deliver a comprehensive strategy and roadmap to get your data architecture under control. For more information on Ezra Group's data assessment service, please go to ezragroupllc.com. And a couple of quick housekeeping notes before we continue. Please subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss an episode. Make sure to check out our sponsor, the Invest in Others Charitable Foundation at investinothers.org. And now, let's kick this thing off. I'm very happy to introduce our next guest on the program. It is Elena Philipova, Director of Sustainable Finance for Refinitiv, which is part of the London Stock Exchange Group. Hello, Elena. Welcome to the program.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
It's wonderful for you to be here. Where are you calling in from?
I'm joining it today from Switzerland.
Wonderful. So nice to speak to you in Switzerland. I'm in lovely New Jersey in the U.S., so power of technology brings us together.
Indeed it does.
So let's kick things off. We're talking about ESG and ESG data on this podcast. So can you give us a 30-second elevator pitch for the Sustainable Finance Group at Refinitiv?
Happy to. So at Refinitiv, we've been providing ESG data to the global financial community for close to 20 years now. So we've definitely been pioneers in the sustainable finance industry. And the primary purpose that we are solving for and servicing the industry with is translating sustainability data, which is not necessarily financially fit or fit for purpose to be used by financial professionals in its raw form, and transforming it into actionable and investor-ready data sets that can inform and enhance investment and financing decisions made by our clients.
Excellent. Thank you for that. So diving into ESG data, maybe I think it would help the audience if you kind of gave an overview of ESG data around, specifically on the ESG data related to wealth management.
Yeah, ESG data is a term that's been around for more than 20 years now. And it's not necessarily a new data set. It exists for decades. Previously, it used to be defined as Sustainable Responsible Investments data or SRI data. But what is included in ESG has evolved over time, and it's changing very much, very rapidly, primarily because of two main reasons. One is definition standards around the world are evolving in terms of what ESG data for investors and wealth, in particular users, needs to look like so that it's relevant, material, actionable, so that it's less noisy, so to speak. ESG data currently is some view as a noisy data set. And to reduce that noise, it's really important to drive towards global consistent definitions and standards. So that's one of the drivers. And another driver is regulation. We've seen the role of regulators in this space escalating and accelerating very rapidly in recent years around the world. And this force, or what we call a push factor, is pushing integration and incorporation of ESG factors in all investment financing decisions. As such, finance professionals require data to be able to firstly diagnose their portfolios, product strategies, exposure to sustainability-related risks, but equally to sustainability-related opportunities. And secondly, build strategies that allow them to execute on different objectives that they have or that their customers have asked for, and measure, monitor progress against those objectives. So data really underpins the full value chain, and what is ESG data has evolved in recent years to a lot more clear data sets of sustainability-related themes, KPIs, and metrics that companies, financial firms, and anyone else that uses the data is required to start measuring and reporting against.
I thought that was interesting. You called your use of the term push factor.
Yes, what we've seen in the market is very interesting dynamics. Until a few years ago, it's the pull factor that has led to the state of the industry. And what I mean by a pull factor, it's market-led initiative. It's the investors that have been demanding from companies to receive ESG data. But this has been going on for quite some time, and we've been seeing incremental improvements year after year. But the speed with which the industry has adopted and understood sustainability has not been sufficient. Therefore, regulators, I think, have realized that they have a really important and urgent role to play in creating that push factor that accelerates adoption of sustainability and ESG data across the financial industry, across all players in the financial industry.
Indeed.
So the combination of the two is what we believe creates a new norm in capital markets, which is here today.
You also mentioned sustainability-related opportunities. Can you give me an example of a sustainability-related opportunity that wealth management firms or fintechs could be open to?
Happy to, and I think the easiest and the most obvious example is related to climate change and the decarbonization of the economy and the race to net zero. What that means is that there will be no industry, there will be no single company that doesn't get impacted by this transformation. Many will emerge as leaders, those that innovate and create the technologies of the future that solve for the climate challenges across their industry. And the companies that choose to sit on the sideline and watch and kind of continue with the business as usual mode face an ever increasing risk of being left behind, because I think that it is no longer a debate of if and why. The conversation is about how and how quickly.
Indeed. So let's move on to the
opportunity, and just one other comment.
Sure.
That the opportunities that I'm referencing are also not only kind of financial opportunities and innovation-led opportunities to support the transformations that are happening and are going to continue to happen across the global economy. But it's even more fundamental in terms of just sustaining economic growth and job creation. I think there's been quite a lot of literature and examples that prove sustainability transition is and will continue to be one of the major sources of economic growth and job creation, whether it's at a country level or at a sector level, at a company level. There are numerous examples out there that speak volumes about that.
Let's talk more about ESG data specifically and around the process of gathering it and accessing it. So what makes it ESG data so difficult to collect and access?
That's a great question. And interestingly enough, in our conversations with wealth managers, with advisors, and other customers that we service with ESG data, one of the key reasons of kind of reluctance to roll out more broadly sustainability across the portfolios and products of our customers is the challenges around ESG data. So ESG data very frequently is quoted as the reason number one for reluctance and slowing down adoption. And from my perspective, I think that this is human nature going full speed. Human nature is such that it's reluctant to change, and we also like to procrastinate. So we look for reasons and excuses to be lazy, to push back on change. And data, ESG data, has been used as one of those reasons most frequently because the data set is quite different. It's not a typical data set that the financial industry is used to deal with. It's patchy. It has gaps. It has holes in the data. Unlike financial data, for example, which is mandatory and all companies have to report on a consistent frequency within a consistent template following the same accounting rules. This is not the case with ESG data. ESG data up until very recently has been reported by companies on a voluntary basis. Numeric most of the time, and even if it's numeric, it's not in units that the financial industry is used to deal with. It's usually not in money or in percentages most of the time. It's in tons. For example, greenhouse gas emissions in tons, or energy in megawatt hours, or injuries per 100 employees, and so on. So the type of data is a different data set. And that makes it, for some users, scary to face and deal with. But on the contrary, over all of those years that we've been servicing the financial industry and different wealth managers, we've seen numerous examples of users building very successful investment strategies, enhancing conventional products to overlay them with sustainability considerations, whether that's overlaying them with an overall ESG score or with some of the more granular components like intensity ratios or even board independence. There are a number of very widely used ESG metrics within the wealth management firms to screen on and provide solutions that respond to requirements of the retail investors, of the end users. And if you think about it, I mean, all of us, it's quite natural that we want to preserve our environment. It's quite natural that we want to see people being treated fairly, and that there are fundamental human rights being respected by institutions included in our pension funds or institutions that we invest our wealth into. Most of the time, it is lack of knowledge that leads to a lot of the capital being allocated into organizations that retail investors would not be happy to find out they are financing. So it's about knowledge, and that's what data provides. Data provides knowledge, and knowledge leads to accountability. And this is what is really required for capital markets to be able to service society.
So talking about the data set, the ESG data set, how different it is, how patchy it is, the gaps, the holes you mentioned, and you also mentioned it's a noisy data set. How does Refinitiv go about cleaning the data to turn it into a better data set that can be used in wealth management?
And this has been exactly what we've been doing for all these years. It's about taking a non-financial data set that tends to be very much narrative, so it's unstructured data for vast majority of it, and transforming it into investment-grade data sets. Let me maybe start by explaining what, from our perspective, an investment-grade data set is. This is a data set that is, firstly, reliable and trusted. Secondly, it's numeric, it's quantitative, it's consistent, comparable, and it's auditable, it's transparent. So the way we do that is by, well, firstly, mobilizing a very significant team of experts and specialists that are trained on reading through those hundreds of pages that are usually included in sustainability reports and extracting the data in a consistent, comparable way. So we've provided, we've broken all of the ESG questions into components, into simple questions where the chance of subjectivity and not comparability of the data is minimum. And the analysts follow very specific guidelines when they look for answers to those questions. So, for example, if a company is publishing its climate-related strategy and talks about different processes in it and how they plan to achieve the decarbonization strategy, and let's say the company has committed to net zero by 2030, we break it into, does the company have a policy? Yes, no. Great. Is there a process? Yes, no. Is there a target? Yes, no. How much is the target? By what year? So you break up the text into very clear data points and KPIs, which, if answered by different analysts, they will answer it the same way. And we preserve the connection between the way that the company has reported the data and the metrics that are captured in our system. So everything is fully transparent, leveraging click-through technology, and it is very similar to how our fundamental data is also presented in our products to our clients. It is the same technology that powers that transparency from the aggregation and the overall scores back to the underlying inputs and metrics and back to the actual source documents that we've used in collecting the data. To give you just a few numbers, our operations team, these are our ESG specialists, consists of more than 700 analysts, and we process data on 12,000 global organizations. It's a very labor-intensive and time-consuming process to do that transformation of ESG reports and text into investor-ready and actionable ESG data sets.
I'd like to take a break from this episode to talk about our sponsor, the Invest in Others Foundation. The Invest in Others Foundation is running the Invest in Others Awards, which is a program that recognizes the charitable work of financial advisors in communities across the country and around the world. Awards are presented at their signature event, the annual Invest in Others Awards Gala. Over 600 advisors and financial services executives attend this premier event to celebrate those individuals that actively give back to their communities. I've gone to, I think, the last 3 award galas. They had to cancel it for COVID, and then they canceled it again last year, 2021. It was normally in September, October timeframe, but hopefully we'll have it again this year. So there are 5 categories of awards that recognize the distinct ways that advisors have made a difference through their work with a nonprofit. So the nominations deadline is April 1st. That's less than a month. Just go to investinothers.org and you can click on the click here to nominate link and nominate an advisor. If they win in one of the 5 categories, which are Catalyst Award, Community Service Award, Volunteer of the Year Award, Lifetime Achievement Award, and Emerging Impact Award, they can win, let's say, finalists in all categories receive $25,000 for their charity. The winners in the Catalyst, Community Service, Next Gen, and Volunteer of the Year categories receive $50,000. The advisor who receives the Lifetime Achievement Award receives $75,000. That's a lot of money for a charity, can really help. I've been lucky enough to be on the nominating committee, the awards committee, the judging committee for a bunch of these different awards. It's really hard. These advisors do some great work, both local communities in the US, in South America, in Central America, in Africa, in Asia, across the world, and right here at home. All kinds of great stories, great charities that help people of all ages, shapes, and sizes. You should nominate someone and also donate. Your company will probably match your donation, which provides twice the benefit. Please go to investinothers.org. Thanks. Yes, 700 analysts processing data on 12,000 organizations is quite a huge lift. Not something that many other companies could be able to handle.
Indeed, and you do need a lot of specialized experience and expertise to do that as well. The training cycle of our analysts is a lot longer than a typical training cycle to collect any other data set. Because again, the concepts, the topics that are covered under ESG data are so wide-ranging, and you do need to be familiar with them to be able to synthesize and extract meaningful data out of the reports. Our analysts tend to specialize on industries because sustainability themes tend to be more relevant and material to certain sectors over others. So, for example, climate change is certainly more relevant to oil and gas and transportation companies than maybe financial institutions. Although we shouldn't undermine the importance of financial institutions through their indirect impact on climate via investments. They are accountable under their Scope 3 emissions, also for the emissions put in the atmosphere by the companies that they invest in.
How many data sources does Refinitiv aggregate in your data sets?
So we capture ESG data from roughly about 24 publicly available information sources. And maybe it's important to mention the reason to rely on public data only. And that is to be able to provide an investment-grade data set that's trusted and reliable. It is important to make sure that we take only credible data. And from our experience, if companies are reluctant to publish data in the public domain, usually its data quality tends to be a lot lower. So about 20 or so sources are used in capturing ESG data, but those are specifically to the self-reported ESG data points. So whether that's the annual reports or 10Ks of companies, different integrated reports, sustainability reports or GRI reports, the proxy statement. Then there are different committee charters, code of conduct documents, corporate governance reports, bylaws and constitution. I mean, a lot of the kind of sustainability information is embedded in the DNA of companies. So our analysts really need to go deep into the organization that they process data for to be able to extract the data. And in addition to that, we source data from a number of external to the company sources, like, for example, lobbying contributions, or companies that are on the HRC index. So there are some additional sources that we also process data from, and this gives a view that we like to describe as inside-out view. So it allows users of the data to understand what companies put out about themselves. But our users would like to normally complement that with an outside-in view as well. So assess the perception about companies, and are companies walking the talk? How are they viewed from the communities and societies where they operate? So we also source ESG controversies from global editorials, including Reuters, but not limited. And through partnerships, we also assess sentiment from social media. So that allows clients to really do something like a balance scorecard and evaluate our companies walking the talk.
So when you're consolidating data from multiple sources, now these, and you have about 20 public sources you mentioned, they each could use different methodologies, and those methodologies require some estimates, maybe even some guesstimates as to certain things, because and you're trying to organize data which is not standardized, and oftentimes that data could have errors or a range of accuracy. Then you're compiling multiple data sources that have different ranges of accuracy, different estimates. What do you do with your methodology to ensure that these errors don't multiply as you put them together?
So there are two parts to your question. The first is around ensuring comparability of the data, because there is no one accounting standard, there is no one way to calculate and aggregate these data that companies can rely on for publishing it. There are different standards, different definitions. Some companies will provide the ratios in a very inconsistent and not comparable way. So part of what we add on top of the data is ensuring that layer of standardization. But this is not very unique to only ESG data. It's a similar concept to even company financials. There are different gaps in accounting standards, IFRS, US GAAP, and so on. And even within our financial data, we have what's called as-reported layer of the data. And some clients like to see the data in its raw form because it allows them to go deep into the unique nuances of individual companies. But equally, we offer a standardized layer which allows users to have that comparable view across a portfolio of companies, across different sectors, geographies, and even asset classes. So in ESG, we do the same approach. We capture the data as reported by the companies. We very diligently collect the units, definitions, and so on. And then our technology, our solution that we've built to capture the data, aggregates it and creates a standardized layer. So units are converted to the same units, same ratios. We also apply consistent accounting standards and definitions. So, for example, on GHG emissions, some companies may classify type of emission as Scope 2 emissions, and for other companies it may be Scope 3 emissions. We apply the GHG protocol definitions, and we reclassify the data to ensure that it's fully comparable within the standardized layer of ESG data. So kind of this is the first side about comparability. The second part of your question, and very rightly so, is about data quality. And there's been even rising concerns in the industry around greenwashing, and can ESG data be used with confidence to inform investment decisions and strategies? And are those strategies true to what they are meant to assess and deliver? So data quality is quite important in this space. And it, again, goes back to the fact that there are no mandatory and widely agreed standards on how the data should be published. What we do at Refinitiv is, because we've been pioneers in this space and we've been working with ESG data for such a long time, we have a lot of history and historical data. And historical data is a very valuable source of insights and information. So we use leveraging technology. We extract knowledge from the historical data that we apply to all new data that we capture. And we run hundreds of checks on the data that assess comparability, consistency, that assess correlated metrics, that assess variance in data that's been captured for each industry. So for numeric metrics, we know within what range any data point needs to be. And this is quite useful to capture outliers and capture errors in companies' own reports. And we unfortunately still see those. Company may say that the data reported is in thousands, but actually we see it's missing 3 zeros. So what we do in those cases is we put the company on hold. We believe it's really important from an ESG perspective, because the data is not market. It's not like other data sets real time. It doesn't get refreshed every minute, every hour, every day even. So it's important to ensure its accuracy, and we put the data on hold. We contact the companies. We rectify the problem. Many times companies say, yeah, there was a mistake in our report, and they immediately make a correction. We then put the right number in the system, and that's what's used to calculate the ESG scores of companies. And this is really important because the ESG scores are informed by all of the data in a data set in a peer group. They're relative to a peer group, and if you have one significant outlier, it can significantly impact the score of everyone else. And that can trigger a lot of investment activities that are not desired. So we've been putting a lot of emphasis when designing our tools to ensure that data is double, triple, and quadruple quality controlled before it's published to product.
Elena, we are running out of time, but I wanted to squeeze in one more question, which I think will be helpful for our audience. Could you give us a quick, in just the next 2 minutes, an example of a use case where a fintech or wealth management firm would be able to use your data, maybe more on the fintech side, because I know you've got many partnerships with fintechs that use your ESG data.
Happy to, and that's indeed what we've seen happening in recent years is a lot of fintechs are entering the sustainable finance landscape because there are endless opportunities. It's a field that's hungry for innovation, and thus it makes it really attractive for fintechs. However, as I described, creating a consistent and rich enough ESG data set to be used to build those innovative solutions to solve for different sustainability use cases and challenges, there needs to be a very strong partner, and that's what Refinitiv has been viewed by many fintechs that come to us and want to work to create those solutions for the financial industry of the future to enable more accelerated adoption of sustainability into core investment and product design workflows and solutions. So we've done quite a number of those partnerships in recent months and years, and we believe that they're a very important enabler for adoption of sustainability globally at the pace that's needed. In terms of wealth management firms, the use case there is we work with quite a large number of some of the largest wealth managers, and they use our data to present it to their advisors, because the advisors are being asked by the end users and customers around sustainability considerations more and more frequently. And having access to the data allows the advisors to have the right conversations with their customers to provide them with the right advice that aligns with their personal beliefs and expectations that go beyond just pure financial performance, but also touch on sustainability desires and needs. So it empowers them to have, again, knowledge and provide the right solutions at the hands of their customers.
Elena, that was an excellent answer and just in time. Can you please let the audience know, because we're now done, can you give the audience where they can find out more information about Refinitiv Sustainable Finance?
We publish quite a lot of information on refinitiv.com under ESG data. I would also encourage you to follow our Refinitiv perspectives. There is a option to select ESG as a team, and then you'll receive a lot of thought leadership reports and blogs that we publish on the topic. And these are the main places to start with, and happy to provide any additional support if needed.
Fantastic. Elena, thanks so much for being on the program.
Thank you for having me, Craig, and have a good day.
Recording stopped.
Hey, it's Craig again. Here are my top 3 takeaways from this interview. Regulators are a push factor who are pushing integration of ESG into all investment decisions. Now the question is, should regulators be doing this, or should the government be doing this in general, or should the decision be left up to investors whether or not they want ESG to be used? Number 2, investment-grade data is reliable, trusted, quantitative, consistent, comparable, auditable, with the goal of minimizing subjectivity. Number 3, Refinitiv's data operation team has over 700 analysts. That's crazy. But you can see the breadth and depth of their coverage, where they cover over 12,000 organizations. And that's a wrap for this episode. Thanks for listening. Please go to our website, EzraGroupLLC.com, scroll to the bottom of the homepage, and sign up for our newsletter. Once a month, you'll receive an email full of chock full of wealth management goodness that includes news, analysis, information, links, all kinds of things, and you will not be disappointed. Thanks for listening, and talk to you all again next time.